Welcome to The Spoken Nerd, the podcast for database professionals. I'm your host, Connor McDonald, and in this episode, I'll keep chatting to Dom Giles, long-term Oracle legend in the community, about his thoughts on the Oracle database. In this episode, we'll talk about what my favorite version was, and also how features come into the Oracle database, and how customers can request the features that they'd like to see. Let's continue on chatting with Dom. We often get pushback. Certainly, my Twitter DMs often light up with, why did Oracle build this? Why do they do it this way? Why have they built this particular functionality? I just want to let listeners know, I don't know this for a fact, but I'm pretty confident. A bunch of people don't sit in a room going, yeah, we've had no feedback from customers. Let's just imagine some stuff and see if we can throw it together. I can be pretty confident that the only things we build is because someone out there has said, we need this. Yeah. This is critical for our business. And sure, I'm sure we take things and run with them. But the reality is, I think every company, Oracle included, builds things in response to customer demand, as opposed to just throwing things at the wall and having some fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Although the model clause maybe is no, I shouldn't.
I think in some respects it's an interesting conversation. We could have a whole podcast just on why features exist and the history behind some of the features and who asked for them. Well, we maybe couldn't say who asked for them. I think that would be, because we don't want to put the blame on anyone else. But yeah, Oracle is incredibly focused on delivering what customers ask for. Now, whether that fee comes back through direct integration. Now, clearly, there is the case to be made that whoever shouts loudest basically wins in that particular race. So yeah, you do end up with situations where perhaps looking back on it, it was because someone was shouting very loudly for a piece of functionality that it got implemented. And looking back on it, perhaps we could have let that go. At that time, the decisions were actually made. And I think I would struggle to find any feature inside of Oracle that was based on just because a developer thought it would be interesting. I can't think of many like that, but I'm sure that my colleagues or indeed some ex-Oracle employees will always say, I know about 6 or 7, but that's the nature of an organization. But we generally, all of the big features have come from customer feedback. And I remember the multi-tenant, the meetings that were actually held there, it was purely based on customer feedback and around consolidation. And the vision that the customer defined at that stage is very close, very, very close to what we actually ended up delivering. So, and you can go back all the way from Oracle 8 onwards and see that the functionality that was placed inside of the Oracle database was almost 100% driven by customer requirements. But yeah, it does lead to situations where when you actually deliver it to a customer, they're like, well, actually, it's not quite what I wanted, which is the classic, swing on a tree type analogy of, this is what I expected and this is what you've delivered.
And I have to admit, in our own defense, it's funny how it's very easy to have a siloed view of that. And I experienced that to my own humiliation once when, I think around about Oracle 12, we introduced, I think it was temporary undo. Oh, it might have been even before that. Anyway, I gave a talk and I was doing my standard 12C new features talk and went through some more cool stuff, online move, all this kind of stuff, and pattern matching. And I said, we have this thing called temporary undo, and I explained what it was about. And I said, I can't think of any real reason why this might be useful. Anyway, let's move on. And this is that siloed approach. I couldn't think of a reason, so I'm going, this feature's rubbish. The talk finishes. This guy comes like marching up to the front, and I'm going, oh, this doesn't look good. And he's going, we have been waiting for temporary undo 5 years. This is going to transform our business. This is the greatest thing ever. And then proceeded to explain to me how in Active Data Guard.
Yeah.
Exactly. That ability to then be able to consume redo because you have temporary undo. And like he's going, we're loading up temporary tables. This is an absolute game changer. This is so fantastic. And I'm like, okay, I understand now. Like for anyone using Active Data Guard, this is a game changer. I'm up here going, yeah, can't really see a use for it. Doesn't sound very useful, but it's so easy to criticize a feature because it doesn't fit in your silo, but for someone else it could be fantastic.
And I think that's the difference, right? Oracle has got hundreds of thousands of customers worldwide, and what a feature useful for one particular customer will have no relevance to 10,000 other customers. So it's very difficult when you actually take a look. And we get so much feedback. Thousands and thousands of enhancement requests still come in every month for the Oracle database. And so it's difficult for us to go through and choose which one to pick and which one comes prioritization. You spend a lot of time doing that sort of work.
Speaking of enhancement requests, one thing I want to encourage our listeners to do, if you go to community.oracle.com, I think, and just search for database ideas, we have a particular, once you've navigated your way through our interesting forum pages, you'll stumble across a thing called database ideas. The reason I want to shout that out to listeners, and I'll put a link in the show notes, was not just so you can add your own ideas there, which Dom and I both encourage you to do so, but the fact that a lot of people have been vocal on Twitter and other social media saying, we've logged ideas and they never seem to get actioned. I'd like people to go to the database ideas page, because I went there recently to have a look and see where we're at. And I want you to sort them by top. So basically, sort them by the number of people that voted for their particular feature, and take the top, say, 20, and click on each one. And you'll see at the end of each one, a whole chunk of them being delivered, and even the ones that say currently pending, I've annotated most of them to put what release they're coming, or sometimes it still says pending, but we actually have delivered it. I don't have the rights to update it to deliver it. But out of the 20, I think about 15 of the top 20, 15 have either been delivered or they're coming in an upcoming release, and they're actively in the current beta. So for those people who are out there giving me crap about, oh, you don't action them, rest assured.
That's their job, though, the way, Connor. That's literally what they should be doing to you.
I want them to eat their words, because I went through, and I was actually very pleasantly impressed to see that we've been focused on those top elements. There's hundreds of ideas in there, but the ones that have been top voted on, the ones that are desperate by the community, are almost all either delivered or in the process of being delivered. So I'm pretty proud of that.
Congrats to you, Connor, and Chris, and all of the other guys who are engaging with the community. We are listening, and clearly it comes down to resources and prioritization of features. We don't have an infinite number of developers that can actually focus on every feature, and so we are trying to get to as many as we can. You'll certainly see in the upcoming release, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little later, that I think we've made big inroads into picking up some of those features. It's difficult. It's difficult getting to all of them. Some of them, we'd love to do, and it's just down to
time and money.
Time and money, and we will get to all of them. 100%. Ultimately, we'll get to all of those features, so it's not wasted. And whenever you do bump into myself or Connor or Chris or Gerald or Maria at a conference, it is so worth spending the time engaging with them and shaking a tree and pressing for a feature that you really think is worth actually having or make a difference. But I would encourage people to think about, is a feature just a quality of life, or something that will really change and be transformational inside of your database usage? And if it's one of those transformational ones, then absolutely. If you don't see it, keep shouting us. And as I say, it comes back to that story of whoever shouts loudest tends to win the day when it comes to innovation. Not right. Here's me talking about quiet giants. But ultimately, it would be nice to think that we could implement every feature. But again, there is a resource and prioritization process.
And for those listening, Dom's home address is as you get the picket line out front.
Yeah, exactly. We want.
Just to finish off the favorite releases, I'll probably just finish off and say my favorite release probably was 11.2. But there's a very personal story behind that. I attempted an upgrade on AIX. On 11.1 on a rack system, very early version of 11.1, hadn't been patched. That was an upgrade where we pretty much ended up in the fetal position under the desk, having to phone the CEO saying that we weren't going to be up the next day.
Oh.
And then, so when the same upgrade came around going to 11.2 and it went much, much smoothly, I was like, this is the greatest release of the database ever known to man. So there is a personal bias there.
I think any release where you actually have a personal success on is going to clearly win you over.
It's going to be a winner. We spoke about favorite releases and there's Oracle 10, Oracle 9, Oracle 12, etc., Oracle 11. But all of those were many, many years apart. And recently we've changed that release model. And we originally went quite aggressively to looking at almost doing things yearly, but that was almost overkill for our customers. They were like, my God, turn off the faucet, please. We're getting swallowed up here with the releases. So we batched that out, meant a bit more gap between them. The release model in terms of innovation versus long-term. What are your thoughts on that? Do you like the idea of having the two sort of concepts of innovation long-term, or should we just basically pump out releases every 2 years? Or
So here's the thing. When you've got a piece of infrastructure like a database, and it's key to any database, right? Any of our databases or any of our competitors, it's key to the lifeblood of any organization. So any changes to it has substantial impact across an organization. So everyone is rightly wary of change when it comes to databases. I hear from other people say, oh, you shouldn't be afraid of upgrade. It is a big change, and it's a big commitment for organizations. And so clearly being a product manager, one of my things I love doing is getting new features into the hands of end users. Arguably, it's my very job to try and encourage customers to use new features and to take feedback from them. So I love new stuff, and I love getting new stuff out as quickly as I possibly can. But we are in a difficult situation. Any big change we make has an impact to mission critical infrastructure all over the world. So we have to be very cautious when it comes to those things. So long-term releases have a role to play, but at the same time, there's nothing worse than being a development organization. It doesn't matter whether it's databases or not, actually sitting on features for a long period of time. Because once you finish a feature, you actually want to get it in the hands of the customers as quickly as you can. You want to make sure the feature is actually tested and sweated and there are no problems that can occur. And so waiting every 3 or 4 years for a big long-term release just because it's important for the stability of customers' environments is kind of difficult for us as well. So what an innovation release is almost our opportunity to put new functionality in the hands of customers, to make sure that the feature is actually out in the field and being tested in some respects, or indeed actually used in production, because as innovation releases can be used for production workload, and we definitely do have customers who are doing that. But we understand that it's, customers, certainly when it comes to Oracle and its use in mission critical environments, are going to be very hesitant about upgrading the database. So I'm caught on this one, Connor. I would love to basically think that we could do a release every 2 years and it would be fine and customers would upgrade. But the reality is upgrading the database isn't just about flicking a switch. It's also about the significant amount of regression testing that has to go on, all of the QA testing, all of the additional training potentially that has to be done alongside of it. So there are so many aspects to an upgrade that makes it challenging for our customers. So coming back as a product manager for Oracle, I would basically say, as opposed to being just a product manager, I would basically say, we're going to deliver what customers feel comfortable with. And so if customers only want significant releases every 4 years, because that's a comfortable timeline in terms of repairing, staging and doing the engineering work and then doing the testing that has to go along with the release, then I'm good with that. Would I like them to be done every year and then have or even modely have a completely, greenfield type approach where it's just, we stick at version 12 and then there's only ever version 12, what is similar to what you see with macOS, and it's just constant incremental changes? I would prefer that model, right? But that's slightly trickier for our partners who deliver ISV applications on top of them. And it's trickier for customers as well, who like to know exactly where they stand at any point in time. So yeah, I'm constantly caught between the two approaches.
I've had people say to me, why can't the database just be like Chrome? Chrome, you start up Chrome and it says, it's been updated. And I feel like saying, that's all well and good. I said, but if your Chrome update goes belly up, your Mac won't start, or you can't reach eBay. If your database won't start, that's a little bit more significant. Just to pick up on your point and just to reassure people listening, innovation releases, giving customers a chance to test them. I want to stress, we test the living daylights out of all our releases. It's more the fact that the reality is, let's be realists here, customers will always find ways to massage a product in interesting ways that we'd never thought of. You see those memes, you've ticked off every single unit test, and then day one it goes out to a customer and they go, it's broken. And you go,
it works here. Yeah, I mean, the cycles we spend on testing, and they're the unsung heroes of any development organization. It's not just Oracle, any development organization. It was true for every company I've worked with. They're the unsung heroes, just simply because the amount of effort and amount of compute cycles that has to go in to test applications. And I mean, it doesn't matter whether you're running unit tests. I mean, there is so much work to ensure that something that is effectively non-deterministic in nature delivers the result that you expect every single time under every single condition is a huge amount of effort. And for them, it is very much like painting the Golden Gate Bridge. As soon as they literally finish, it's back onto the same process again. they try their very hardest to come up with new and innovative ways to break the product so that no one else sees that. And I think we've significantly improved that over a period of time as well. We've got much smarter about every test and every problem that customers encounter. We basically then use as a test inside of Oracle to ensure that we don't have those regressions, which even do happen, but try our very best to ensure that doesn't happen.
Through the active work on Ask Tom, I've learned that because some of the ask literally a one-line question. And I'm like, oh, I've got to set up a database on this platform at this release level. Set up this particular table. Oh, the parameter, init parameter is going to be set up like this. I've got to turn off memory tag. I've got to turn this on and then see if I can reproduce what they're getting. And I'm going, yeah, I wouldn't want to be a tester.
No. I mean, it is hard. I mean, the virtualization has made that very much simpler than it used to be. But yeah, if someone's has got a problem that only occurs on a VM running Red Hat 7 on a IBM mainframe, running version 11.2 of the database with, is linked with, it becomes very, very difficult for the support organization to do that. But it's what we promise our customers we'll try and do.
Now, on innovation versus long-term, I'll give you my thoughts. People will accuse me now of being an Oracle shill for this, but I love it. I love this system because I can explain why with a real customer, which was the last customer I worked with before I joined Oracle. And we were running, all the systems were running 11.2. And so this is well before the innovation versus long-term release concept came in. But on that system, we had a transactional system, and all it did was pretty much your stock standard transactional system. It basically inserted some rows, occasionally updated them, ran some very basic queries. So just 1,000 transactions per second. It was all about performance of transactions. So that was running 11.204. And even at the time I left it, I think it was still running 11.204, and I keep in touch with the DBAs there. They're moving to 19C. In fact, they've just moved to 19C. And that's the classic example of use case for a long-term support release. I'm on a release which is rock solid. I'm not really using any brand new staking functionality. I just need the database to do what databases do best, store data, query data, etc. And I want it to be rock solid, and now move to the next rock solid release. Now, in the same company, literally in the same data center, they have the data warehouse, which is populated from that transactional system. That was 11.204. The BI people came and they said, we want to do some more interesting stuff with fraud analysis. I won't explain which particular customer this was, but they had an interest in money laundering and fraud. And I said, well, 12.1, pattern matching. And that feature alone justified upgrading. And then when we started running those queries, data warehouse, they said, well, we're trying to solve some performance issues, 12.102 in memory, instantaneous. And then because it's data warehouse, well, how can we get eke some more performance out and also cut our spend on disk? 12.2, online table compression. So in the same customer, same data center, they had a need for long-term support releases, even though it wasn't called that in the day, as in minimal upgrades because they're expensive and hard to test, plus innovation releases. There's a cool feature. It's going to be a transformation for the business. We're prepared to wear the risks of the fact that we have to do some upgrading and maybe not do as much regression testing as we would like to. But in this case, it's on a data warehouse. It's not as mission critical. And they went bang, 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 11.2, 12.1, 12.102, 12.2, 18C, I think, for private temporary tables. And now all their systems are on 19C. Good customer they are. But it's funny how they've walked the two paths. They've walked long-term support and innovation releases even before we invented the terms.
Yeah, so. and we do try, and certainly the innovation release is a vehicle for that sort of change. And I do encourage customers, even if they're not interested in potential features, it is also a fantastic vehicle for doing the engineering work ahead of an upcoming long-term release. So if you're preparing for Oracle Database 23C, doing the engineering work on Oracle Database 21C gets you so far along the path in terms of the things you can basically expect. And it makes that transition to Oracle Database 23C that much simpler.
Exactly. A real simple example I saw on Stack Overflow just recently. Someone had installed 21C Express Edition, and they're going, I can't connect. I installed it. I've done everything right. I just can't connect. And what had happened was they were looking at Oracle Home Network Admin for their TNS names to Aura, which of course doesn't apply anymore because we have the read-only Oracle Home. They'd simply edited their TNS names to Aura file in the wrong spot because they were used to Oracle 19 and below. And classic Stack Overflow, they're like, this product's broken, 21C is different. And I'm saying, well, actually, read-only Oracle Home came back in Oracle 18, just that it's the default in 21. This is actually to your benefit because when you go to 23, you'll know it. You won't be doing your production upgrade and going, my God, where's my TNS names ORA file gone?
And read Oracle Homes is one of those classic features that was a customer request. We had thousands and thousands and thousands of customers asking to remove all write activity from the Oracle Home, and it was a relatively big engineering project to actually make that happen.
And certainly sweet for people that use Docker.
Absolutely.
You can just put your Oracle Home on a volume and just... Yeah.
And exactly. And so it's there now. And I think customers will start to feel that, as you say, they move through Oracle 19, 21C default, 23C default again, and really benefit from that piece of functionality. Again, a massive customer request, but something that you can fall foul of if you're not ready for it, even though you want to.
Now, the only thing probably more controversial than release cycles is the fact that we now release patches every 3 months. Rather than put you on the spot with innovation versus long-term support, I'll give you my thoughts on patching, and then you can choose to rebut them or agree with them. I'm happy either way.
I'm always going to agree with you, Colin.
No. I've already given you the £20 earlier. So, I used to come around to the thought of if you need to patch and if things are running fine, they're not. But I've changed my thoughts, and this isn't just from joining Oracle. I've come around to this well before I started joining Oracle, and that is I'm of the theory now that when a patch, or we call them an RU now, when RU comes out, I think you should apply it. Now that means you're applying a patch every 3 months, which is can be a large undertaking. And the controversial part of that is I think it is actually better to apply those patches with not as much regression testing, because it is just impossible to regression test everything every 3 months. That's just not practical. But my thoughts are you should patch every 3 months anyway, and therefore you won't get as much chance to regression test, and therefore you might need to react to the occasional regression. Now that, a lot of people, DBAs listening to this will be going, yeah, thanks a lot for that recommendation. But the reason I've headed that way is if you get a regression, even a bad regression, which kills performance or your system has an unexpected outage, etc., all of those things, no matter how much frustration and management kickback you'll get, pale into insignificance from you getting hacked. If you get hacked because you didn't apply a security patch, you're toast. It's not just your reputation perhaps as a DBA or an IT department, but your company may well be toast. In fact, there have been two very high profile ones in Australia just recently, a large telco and even worse, a large health fund. Dark web people are currently releasing that personal health information out onto the internet because these people refuse to pay the ransomware. But I've come around to the conclusion that I would rather have an outage. I would rather have a performance problem than have to go up to an auditor or a CEO or anyone or any kind of committee and say, yes, we got hacked via a mechanism that we could have patched 6 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So I'll turn it over to you. What are your thoughts?
No, I mean, everyone's circumstances are different, right? And there is not a single customer that's the same. And I think it's very difficult to force a model on everyone that's the same. It's true for life. And not everyone's the same. So trying to force a pattern on how you should live your life is impossible. I don't want to get all philosophical about this, but it's very, very difficult to do that. So when it comes to patching, I think it does reflect exactly the same. I think for me, I've seen some of the pressures that DBAs are under on a daily basis. And, I certainly wouldn't want to add to them. And, some organizations that we work with have 10,000 Oracle databases and a team of 20 DBAs. And so, patching 10,000 databases becomes cycles, scheduling it becomes very, very difficult in that period of time to do. So, we are doing our best to make that process less painful. And there's certain things that you can actually do if you really were to engage on the patch no regression test to reduce your risks inside of that team. You're looking at plan stability and all that sort of stuff to reduce the regression that you may incur and those sort of things. So there are things you can do. So I would encourage customers, if they can, to adopt that sort of model where you are patching every quarter. Now, on top of that, you've probably seen we announced at Oracle Cloud World, and we are changing the patching model slightly as well. Previously we used to have RUs and RURs. Moving forward from 1917, we're now moving to RUs and monthly recommended patches. And so what we're trying to do is to come up with a model that is simpler and come up with a model that makes the administrative cost of implementing the things that DBAs used to do, i.e. they always look to apply RUs and then the recommended patches as well. We're trying to make that workflow simpler and more natural for them. So yeah, I would hope that we are getting to that stage now with customers, that they trust us enough to know that the monthly patches are something that they can actually test without significant regression testing. Some testing is always good, but without a full upgrade level regression test. And I hope we're getting to that stage. And we're certainly listening to their feedback in terms of trying to reduce the complexity of some of the processes they have to go through as well.
I noticed that you've taken a much more understanding and empathetic view toward customers. I just want to point out there's no place for that in this podcast, so we need to move on.
I apologise.
And yes, in the time I've known Dom, that is very typical of him, always focused on what's going to best suit the customer so that they will succeed with the Oracle database. In the next episode, we'll talk about Cloud World, and we'll also talk about the contentious topic of microservices. Are they really fit for purpose? Should you be using them? Plus a whole lot more about the database technology future. We'll catch up more with Dom in the next episode. Thanks for listening to this podcast. The music credit goes to Zanman from Pixabay Music.